Alright, what's going on, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back. This is, of course, HD StarCraft, and I'm here to bring you guys another StarCraft 2 Heart of the Swarm broadcast. And we're going to be looking at another game here with Blade after that incredible matchup with him and Seed. A little unfortunate that that replay ended the way that it did. I really wanted to see who was actually going to win that game, because at the end it still seemed really close to me. But I guess Blade ended up loading up the replay version where him and his friend ended up playing at the 30-minute mark. So he didn't load up the version that showed the conclusion with him and Seed. Either that or Seed ended up leaving, and so he reloaded it, and they wanted to see how the game would finish out with Blade playing against his friend. But anyways, we'll just see what happens here. Hopefully that doesn't happen again. He is the red Zerg player at the top right-hand corner, and the map is Star Station. His opponent is going to be none other than TT1, who goes under the name 6 Spartan, and very interested to see how this is going to go down. And obviously TT1 I don't think is as talented as LG's IM Seed, but he is still a very good Protoss player outside of Korea. And this should prove to be a pretty good matchup. Zerg versus Protoss here, and it's a great map. I feel like on Star Station, it's big, lots of expansions. You can really get down to the nitty-gritty of this game if things go to the late game, because there's so many expansions and it's a pretty vast area to work with. So we'll see what happens, but we already have TT1's probe coming in over into the main base, has done a pretty early scout, went down to the bottom right-hand corner first to check out what was going on, and he's now scouted the enemy Zerg player Blade. And Blade, we'll see if he decides to go for the hatchery, which is usually what Zerg players go for, but there's already a pylon there. So the two drones now are going to be fighting and trying to decide who wants to become the hatchery. Of course, one of them is going to be working down this pylon for a very long time until some Zergling support does eventually come through. Meanwhile, the drone, the other drone, goes over and is going to make itself a hatchery over at the 12 o'clock location. That's interesting that he decided to hatch here instead of hatching here. I think most Zerg players decide to get the hatchery at this area instead of the one all the way out here, because this one's pretty far exposed. But we'll see what happens. It looks like the pylon was allowed to finish, so TT1 will not be able to recuperate funds from that. But obviously it's okay, because it's worth blocking the hatchery for as long as you possibly can. And here comes those 4 Zerglings now making their way out of the main. They're going to try to take out this pylon and allow Blade to make a 3rd hatchery at the natural expansion. Meanwhile, TT1 just walling up the front door, has a forge and a gateway, has a nexus down at the natural as well. It's a smart idea for Protoss to go ahead and expand first, I think, on this map, rather than going forge first, because on this map it's so big, especially with a cross spawn, and it's easy to wall off with the forge and a gateway and a pylon. I definitely feel like if you just go for the nexus first, you can eke out that extra little bit of economy, and usually ends up paying for itself in the long run. You know, the bottom line is it's pretty hard to get broken down at the front of this area. This is very choked off and pretty narrow. A couple of photon cannons will usually hold off most types of aggression. And right now it looks like Blade is going to go ahead and control that 12 o'clock Xel'Naga tower. He's sending another Zergling down to the 6 o'clock Xel'Naga tower just to get full vision on the map wherever possible. He has one Zergling now chilling at the front door. He probably won't be able to run behind the wall here with the photon cannon there. But he does get a scout, and he sees that, all right, you do have a photon cannon and you do have a cybernetics core on the way, so you can immediately discount the possibility of anything crazy coming out from TT1. He's not preparing to go for some type of ridiculous one-base build, but we'll see what TT1 follows up with. Will he go for a Stargate play? Will he decide to stick with Gateway Ground? Will he go for even you know, Twilight Tech and try to go for Templars, Archons, and whatnot? Only time will tell here, because Protoss players obviously have a lot of avenues they can work with, and it's important for Zerg to get these Overlords positioned in such a way that you can scout when you need to. And I love what Blade's doing here. He's got an Overlord over here on the left-hand side. He's got another Overlord just starting to blimp over on the right. And eventually he's going to send both of them in, probably at the same time, to figure out exactly what is going on inside of T21's main base. And that's pretty smart. He actually has this one going in right now. But so far, TT1 actually hasn't revealed what he wants to go for yet. Still pretty much, you know, the foundation. Don't see like a Stargate or additional gateways coming yet. But here comes the first gateway. And I think this Overlord from Blade might have just come in for the Peak C a little bit too soon, because Usually you want to send this in around the, I would say around the 7-minute, 30 to 8-minute mark, because that's when you can definitely check out and see what's going on inside the main base. At this point, it's a little bit too early. He's not going to really get a full-on scout. Yeah, he sees 3 gateways, but what Protoss doesn't make gateways? You know, in Protoss versus Zerg, it's almost always required. Back over on the natural, we do have another pylon coming, a couple of assimilators, but the Overlord blows up before it gets full vision. Of course, there's still another Overlord over here on the right, and we'll see if Blade decides to send that one in at some point. He still doesn't have a lair coming yet, and now at this point I definitely have to feel like this is obviously his build. I was kind of critiquing it in the first game I casted with him and Seed. I was like, I wonder why he hasn't gotten the lair yet. Usually most Zergs get it around 7 to 8 minutes at the latest, but this is definitely part of his build, part of his design, to delay the lair in order for him to get a few roaches out, some Zergling speed, get a couple of upgrades going, and then he gets the lair later on. And I don't hate it, you know. Most of the time you want to get that lair right away to hold off against some type of early gateway aggression, the 2-base all-ins that are so dangerous in Protoss versus Zerg. But in Heart of the Storm, you don't see, I don't think you see those 2-base all-ins as much anymore. Mortal Sentry all-in is still very, very powerful, and it's still used quite a bit, but Blade obviously is pretty comfortable with where he's at, and I think he likes to really use those swarm hosts in the initial stages of Zerg versus Protoss in order to hold off those type of ground-based attacks. So as long as he can get up to Infestation Pit and get those swarm hosts out, then he should be okay. This initial scouting Hallucinated Phoenix is going to be finished off right there. But that seems to be the name of the game right now. No quick lair for Blade. He does now have it on the way. It's about to finish up, actually. But it doesn't end up hurting him. Most Zerg players need to get that earlier on. Blade seems to have figured out a way to go ahead and delay it a little bit and get the tech a little later on. Now, will he drop the Infestation Pit in order to get those swarm hosts out that he needs? It looks like he does have the Infestation Pit coming right now. And that seems to be the case. We do have another hatchery outside Star Station, outside the main base, and so Blade now is working up to 4 hatcheries. Meanwhile, T21 does have a robotics facility pumping out Immortal and now pumping out a Warp Prism. It looks like he wants to go ahead and get it looks like he wants to go for an attack here. He's moving out with his Immortal Sentry army, and you know, with the Warp Prism as well, he can certainly go for a 2-pronged attack, try to warp in some stuff inside the main base while attacking through the ground with the rest of his army. And let's see what he goes for here. That Warp Prism is almost done. We do have 6 swarm hosts on the way. Once again, like I said before, this is Blade's kind of strategy in Zerg versus Protoss. He loves to go for swarm hosts in ZVP, and you know, while he does delay the lair, which ends up delaying the swarm host, it seems like all of his timings are set so nice and tight that he gets the swarm host out just in time to deflect most attacks that Protoss players come with around this timing. And you remember on Akalon Waste against Seed, you know, he went for a ground-based attack and the Storm Host popped out just in time at the 4th hatchery. We'll see if Blade will be able to get these out in time. It looks like he's already got them burrowed down, but I don't know if he's going to be able to keep this hatchery alive. It looks like, oh man, the timing is going to be real close, and the Force Heals are now all coming out, trying to keep the Locusts at bay. But Blade is continuing to stream in more forces. Will he have another round of Locusts coming out in time to save this hatchery? It looks like the hatchery's already at below 600 HP, but TT1 is not focusing the hatchery down. He's brought in a Mothership Core, though, really trying to finish off the Zerg army. He doesn't have an Observer, though, so he has no way to pick off the Swarm Host. A lot of Speedlings coming in here, and now TT1 says, all right, I'm just going to focus the hatchery down and then get the hell out of here. He doesn't have it finished yet, though. He needs to focus it, and there we go. Now, will he use the Mothership Recall to get the rest of his troops back home safe and sound? It looks like he will. But wow, that ended up costing a lot of his forces right there. If TT1 had only been able to use some Mothership Recall just a hair sooner, he might have been able to save a lot more forces. Unfortunately, the thing is, with the Mothership Recall, you do have to, or Mass Recall, you do have to put the Mothership nearby all of the units you want to teleport back home. And unfortunately for TT1, his Mothership was not close enough, so while it was moving over, he ended up losing a lot of units. And that ended up working out pretty well for Blade, I'd say. Losing a hatchery, yeah, that hurts. But crushing the Protoss ground army and barely anything allowed to retreat back home, I think you can take that trade pretty happily. Now, this Warp Prism is coming around through the right-hand side. It is going to be scouted by the Zergling and the Overlord. And so TT1 says, all right, I'm going to take that Zergling out first. Meanwhile, the Locusts are beginning to lay siege here at TT1's front door. And TT1 needs to prevent this attack from coming in. He needs to get some Colossus out right now. In fact, a great counter to Swarm Host is Colossus. Either you get Colossus or you get up to Tempest and you start to use air units to take out the Swarm Host and push them back. One or the other. And meanwhile, it looks like the Warp Prism has come all the way around full circle, dropping off a lot of Zealots here. Charge Lots, in fact, trying to take out this hatchery, but it's unlikely that it's going to go down because so many Speedlings and the Swarm Hosts have retreated back home to defend their base. And now TT1 says, all right, I'm just going to go up to the main and unload my Warp Prism, but unfortunately there is a Queen there, so he's going to have to pull out. He won't be able to dish out any more additional damage. But this Warp Prism, I think, while it didn't really get much accomplished, it did allow TT1 to secure his front door because you can see here all the Swarm Hosts have pulled back. Everything has fully retreated back home. Unfortunately, the Warp Prism did end up dying right here to the Spore Crawler, it looks like, or maybe the Queen or something like that. But at the end of the day, that Warp Prism bought TT1 the time he needed to keep his front door safe and secure this third expansion. Now, he's going to be able to get more Colossus out. He's actually pumping them out pretty heavily with the extended thermal lance on the way as well, and he's also got Archons to back up, so he's not going to be too much worried anymore of the Swarm Hosts, because once you get a lot of Colossus out, the Swarm Hosts aren't that effective anymore. But he needs to get, let's see, he's got 3 Colossus right now, so his army is looking pretty good. We'll see what happens. He is pushing right now. We do have some Ultras coming from Blade, and I think he's got some Banelings to mix in with the Ultras as well. There are some Banelings on the production tab at the same time. Some Zerglings trying to take out this Nexus, but TT1 is already all over that. Is going to be able to keep that alive. Meanwhile, a probe makes its way in, and I don't know what this probe thinks it's doing. I think it might have taken the wrong turn back there and ended up running into the Zerg main base, or not main base, but one of the hatcheries, and ends up going down to the Queen. But it leads the way. It paves the path for TT1's main attack here. He's got a ton of Archons and Colossus and Charge Lots. He's going to try to rip through this hatchery. Now he's got to blow through the Corruptors and Banelings and Swarm Hosts and Ultras too. We'll see what happens, but as Blade gets set up, he might lose his hatchery. He's launching out a lot of fungal growths here, but the hatchery has gone down, and great Mothership recall. Wow, the recall occurs just before the Mothership core goes down, and TT1's able to get back home safe and sound with the majority of his forces, and I feel like that was definitely worth it. And you can take out a hatchery, and if you only lose a Colossus and, you know, a Mothership core and a few units here or there, I definitely think it's worth it, because think about the lost mining here that Blade is going to go through now. His income rate is not going to be as large as you would like it to be for a Zerg. Right now he should be making a lot more money in gas, but of course because he lost his hatchery, that ends up eating into his intake. And now Blade gotta be thinking about maybe making a counterattack here. You'll note Protoss player TT1 doesn't have that much bank, so maybe if Blade makes an attack right now, he could certainly blow through the Nexus or maybe do a lot of damage. The shields for this Nexus have already taken a huge beating from these Locusts, and Blade now beginning to lay siege with his Swarm Hosts, and the rest of the army is just waiting in the back, biding its time, allowing the Locusts to slowly cripple the Protoss army, do damage, and then eventually he's going to push in here when he feels most comfortable. But TT1 says, all right, I know your Locusts are on cooldown. I'm going to come in now. Most of the Banelings detonating on the Zealots. Now it's going to come down to these Archons. Will they be able to hold strong against the Ultras? These Ultras are just way too beefy, though. One of these Ultras has 17 HP, but it doesn't matter if it has 1 HP or 500 HP. It still does the same amount of damage, and Blade here is going to crush these 2 Immortals that just ended up walking right by the Colossus. And he lets the Corruptors finish the job on those Colossus as well, so great job. And the Locusts continuing to stream downfield. Meanwhile, we have Zealots that are just coming in for another attack. The Warp Prism comes in for another backstab, and this is exactly what TT1 did last time to survive this assault. He used an attack through the Warp Prism to buy time, and I think this time it might be successful once again. It looks like Blade is just not prepared. He lost the hatchery over here. Meanwhile, though, he was able to take out the Nexus with these Locusts. There is an observer nearby this time for TT1. TT1 should be able to crush these Swarm Hosts, and hopefully Blade is paying attention this time, and he retreats the Swarm Hosts once that Protoss army makes its way to the top of the ramp, but those Locusts are still alive and pushing the Protoss army back. Meanwhile, these Zealots doing damage wherever they can, but this time Blade has roaches, and he will be able to clean up the Warp Prism drop, although the Warp Prism itself is still alive, and TT1, excuse me, can certainly come back in and attack whenever he feels like there's an opening to go for it. This hatchery is just now being remade, so that Warp Prism is ready to drop more Zealots at any moment in time. I would not be surprised to see TT1 go for it. Meanwhile, it looks like TT1 goes over to the bottom, or the 6 o'clock, checking for Zerg forces. He did kill a Zergling or something like that, and right now he's got to get another Nexus because he's going to run dry on minerals pretty soon on this third Nexus. He needs to expand, and the longer he waits, the further behind he falls. He drops 4 more Zealots into the main base, but these Zealots are not going to do diddly squat, and TT1's Warp Prism also now taking a little bit of damage. I think the Warp Prism is going to go down because there are Infestors there, and yeah, the Infestors will make certain to finish off this pesky Warp Prism. And there we go, so the Warp Prism has fallen. Now Blade can comfortably say, alright, I'm going to reestablish my hatcheries here. In fact, he's double expanding. He's got hatcheries all over the place, whereas TT1 doesn't really have any mining bases at all. TT1 needs to kill off a hatchery or two, and he needs to secure the 6 o'clock expansion at all costs right now. Otherwise, he's just going to run the risk of running out of minerals, running out of bank to continue playing this game of StarCraft 2. He has transitioned into Void Rays now. The way the Void Ray works nowadays is it has a prismatic beam that you activate and allows it to do a little bit more damage versus armored units, so it is a little different from the Void Ray you might remember from Wings of Liberty. But I don't know. Actually, you know, the Void Ray isn't a terrible idea. If you think about it, most of the Zerg right now is comprised of Ultralisks. And Void Rays, you activate that prismatic beam, you can crush those Ultras pretty quickly. But the problem is he revealed the Void Rays, and now Blade realizes, okay, you've got some Protoss air units, I need to start making some Corruptors. And that's exactly what he's doing. He's starting to produce Corruptors right now. Let's check the upgrades right now. 1 flyer attacks maxed out on the ground. The Protoss is maxed out on weapons, but only has 1 armor and 1 shield and 1 weapons in air. So it's pretty close in terms of upgrades right now. It looks like TT1 takes out the hatchery at the 3 o'clock position. Beautiful snipe right there, and exactly what he needed to do to keep Blade under control, because the bottom line here is if you let a Zerg player expand like crazy and you don't do anything about it, you're gonna lose the game. And Blade knows that. TT1 knows that. So he's taking out these hatcheries wherever he finds an opportunity where the Zerg player is out of position with his main army. He's going in and he's doing a great job of sniping. And you know, you can do this so much more effectively with Protoss because of the Mothership Core. If you get fungled, if you get caught, no problem. You just recall your whole army out of there and it's safe and it's a-okay. So TT1 is just playing this game really smartly right now, but he needs to secure this base. He needs to throw down some photon cannons, I feel like, but the problem is he doesn't have that much money. He's only got 400 minerals right now, and it's almost like he's juggling the ball right now. Do I get another Nexus, or do I throw photon cannons to help secure this base? Unfortunately, I don't think a Nexus is going to happen because there's a couple of Zerglings there. Meanwhile, this army actually TT1 going in with a couple of DTs here, and the Zerg army doesn't have any detection, and those DTs are just going to have a heyday. Meanwhile, TT1 should be able to win this fight. He's got so many Corruptors here. He's bringing in a couple more Templar as well. All the Ultralists have gone down. Locusts are now starting to fall as well, and it looks like TT1 is going to win this fight. He is going to win this fight, and if he has detection here, he should be able to finish off these Swarm Hosts. Unfortunately, he doesn't have any detection nearby, and that's really unfortunate because that's an opportunity, a missed opportunity. Now Blade can retreat. He can unburrow these Swarm Hosts and get out of harm's way, but it looks like maybe Blade himself is not paying attention to the situation because these Swarm Hosts are so vulnerable. He has the rally set to back home, but he didn't fix the position of the Swarm Host. Meanwhile, the Nexus ended up going down, but or going up, but there's a couple of Zerglings here that were still alive and are beating on the hull of the fortress. And the DTs are now coming in. The Silent Assassins come to save the Nexus. Incredible Zerg versus Protoss game here with Blade and TT1. Absolutely phenomenal. 180 supply to 155. Both players running pretty low on their surplus, but when you look at Blade's hatchery count, he's just got so many hatcheries. He still hasn't even, I was gonna say marinated, but he hasn't main-arted over to this location yet. And so once he goes to this location, he's obviously gonna get a huge influx of income, and hopefully he starts that pretty soon. Meanwhile, over here on the right-hand side, it looks like Blade actually might lose his hatchery because some more DTs somehow snuck their way over here. I think they just walked through on the ground though, but unfortunately there are some infestors nearby. They dropped the fungal and saved the hatchery in the nick of time, so that hatchery is going to stay alive. 4 more DTs being worked out right now. TT1 obviously trying to rely on the silent assassins, but the problem with Dark Templar is once they're scouted out, they're not a very good unit in major combat. And here comes all these Zerglings, man. They are not crack upgraded, but they don't need to be to take out this Nexus in a very quick amount of time. Love the Hydraless additions here to the composition of Blade's army, and the Hydras, along with the Infestor's fungal growth, this army is screwed. There's nothing TT1 can do once these Hydras get underneath. Time Warp comes down to slow the progression of the Hydras, but it doesn't even matter, and Blade just has way too many forces. Meanwhile, at the 12 o'clock, some DTs were able to snipe out a hatchery, but it's a very small consolation to the end result of this game, and Blade is going to be able to take the victory. Beautiful game of StarCraft 2 right there, and we didn't have the weird replay switching at the end of the game that occurred between Blade and Seed. So we do have the conclusion. We have the victor here, Blade, with a phenomenal Zerg versus Protoss game, and I hope you guys enjoyed that cast. Once again, if you guys liked what you saw, feel free to go ahead and send me some replays of yourselves or the streamers or professional players playing at HDreplays@gmail.com. Send the replay, attach the attachment, put a description in the replay, and I'll go ahead and check it out. I'm casting 2v2s and 1v1s, team games, whatever you guys want me to cast, feel free to send it in. And if you guys enjoyed what you saw, check me out on my YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter at HD StarCraft. For now, this is HD, and I am signing out.